Morning inside the Don's mansion never began with sunlight, it began with silence. Thick marble floors reflected dim chandeliers. Guards stood like statues. Every movement followed an invisible script written by fear and loyalty. No one spoke unless spoken to. No one questioned routine. And nothing ever changed. Except today, something had. The Don sat at the head of a long oak table, untouched espresso cooling beside his hand. His empire stretched across cities and shadows, but his mornings were predictable, down to the second. A door opened behind him. Footsteps approached cautiously. Not the right footsteps. His eyes shifted slightly. He didn't turn around. "Where is she?" he asked quietly. The new servant froze. "Surtout." The Don's voice hardened. "The maid who brings my coffee. The one who never arrives late. The one who does not make mistakes." His fingers tapped the table once, a subtle warning. A nervous glance passed between the staff. No one answered quickly enough. 3 years, the Don continued, calm but dangerous. She has worked in this house. 3 years without absence. Without complaint. Without disruption. He finally turned, eyes cold. And today she disappears. A manager stepped forward, sweat forming along his hairline. "Sir, we were told she called in sick." "Told by whom?" Silence again. The Don stood slowly. Chairs scraped as everyone else rose instantly. Fear thickened the air. "In this house," he said, "no one vanishes without a reason. And no one lies about it." He walked through the hallway toward the servant quarters, guards trailing at a distance. His footsteps echoed like a countdown. Paintings of past victories watched from the walls, reminders that betrayal always ended the same way. The maid's door stood closed. "But open it," he ordered. A guard forced the handle. The room revealed perfect order, bed made, clothes folded, nothing overturned. Too clean. Too deliberate. The Don scanned slowly, eyes trained by decades of paranoia. He noticed the absence before the others did. "No phone," he murmured. "No personal bag." He stepped closer to the dresser. A faint square of dust marked where something had been removed recently. On the wall hung a small calendar. Several dates circled in red. The last circle marked yesterday. "What happened yesterday?" he asked. No one answered. He walked to the security console installed discreetly in the room. "Footage," he said. A guard opened a tablet, pulling up recordings from the previous night. The video flickered, then cut to black between midnight and 2 a.m. The Don's expression didn't change. But the temperature in the room dropped. "Technical issue?" he asked. The guard swallowed. "It appears erased." Erased. Not broken. Not missing. Deliberately erased. He stepped back into the hallway, signaling for the head of security. "No police," he said calmly. "This is an internal matter." His gaze swept across the staff. "And from this moment forward, every conversation, every movement, every loyalty will be tested." Whispers began behind him, quiet, terrified murmurs. The Don heard them all. In the kitchen, cooks exchanged uneasy looks. One young server nearly dropped a tray when the Don entered. He scanned faces, reading fear like a language. Some looked confused. Some looked guilty. One looked relieved. That caught his attention. "You," he said, pointing to the man. "Why are you smiling?" The man stammered. "I'm not, sir, I'm nervous." The Don held his stare for a long moment. "You should be." He turned to his advisor, an older man who had stood beside him for decades. "Discreetly question everyone," the Don said. "No violence yet." The pause was deliberate. But no lies either. As the mansion fell under lockdown, surveillance screens filled with movement, guards repositioning, doors sealing, phones confiscated. The Don retreated to his private office, where city lights blinked like distant gunfire beyond reinforced glass. He replayed fragments of memory. The maid had been invisible to most, quiet, efficient, unnoticed. But she had witnessed everything. Meetings, arguments, moments of weakness. Secrets spoken when powerful men believed no one important was listening. And now, she was gone. A knock interrupted his thoughts. The head of security entered, face pale. We found something. The Don watched as a paused frame appeared on the monitor. A hallway camera, grainy, partially obscured by shadows. The maid's door opening late at night. A figure stepping inside. Broad shoulders. Familiar posture. Someone who belonged in the house. Enhance it, the Don said quietly. The image sharpened, but the face remained hidden beneath darkness and angle. Just enough detail to confirm one thing. This was no outsider. The Don leaned back slowly, eyes narrowing. Betrayal felt different when it lived under your own roof. He realized this disappearance wasn't an accident. It was a message. And someone close enough to touch him had delivered it. He closed his eyes briefly, then gave the next order. Lock every exit, he said. No one leaves until I know the truth. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, shaking the windows. Inside, fear spread like smoke through marble corridors. Servants whispered. Soldiers watched each other instead of the doors. Loyalty cracked under invisible pressure. And somewhere in the mansion, perhaps watching, perhaps hiding, the person who had entered the maid's room last night already knew what the Don had just begun to suspect. The greatest threat to his empire wasn't waiting beyond the gates. The mansion no longer breathed like a home. It pulsed like a trapped animal. Doors stayed locked. Guards doubled their rounds. Conversations died the moment footsteps approached. The Don's quiet order, no one leaves, hung over the halls heavier than any weapon. Every loyal soldier suddenly felt like a suspect. Every smile looked rehearsed. And every silence felt dangerous. In the main hall, the Don sat beneath a chandelier that cast fractured light across his face. One by one his inner circle entered. Men who had survived wars with him. Men who had shared blood, secrets, and power. Now they avoided each other's eyes. Sit, the Don said. No one argued. The first lieutenant spoke quickly, trying to sound calm. Boss, our rivals could be behind this. A kidnapping to weaken us. We should focus on external threats. The Don studied him. You want me to believe an outsider walked through locked gates, erased security footage, and disappeared without leaving a trace? His voice was soft, too soft. Inside this house, nothing happens without permission. Silence spread like smoke. He turned to another advisor. Finances, he said. I want every movement traced. An accountant stepped forward with trembling hands. We noticed something small, sir. Payments routed through shell companies. Minor amounts, almost invisible. He hesitated. They linked to domestic staff payroll accounts. A ripple moved through the room. Someone shifted uncomfortably. Someone else clenched their jaw too tight. Small payments, the Don repeated. Over time, small becomes power. A younger capo leaned forward. Maybe she was being paid by someone. Maybe she was spying. Or maybe, the Don replied, someone here was paying to keep her silent. Eyes flicked across the table. Alliances silently forming, suspicions sharpening. Old rivalries resurfaced like ghosts. Men who once trusted each other now measured distance like enemies. Hours later, the mansion transformed into an interrogation chamber without walls. Trusted soldiers questioned one another in private rooms. Phones were searched. Accounts frozen. Even family members found guards stationed outside their doors. In the kitchen, whispers spread faster than orders. One cook claimed the maid had overheard arguments about succession, who would inherit power when the Don eventually stepped down. Another said she had seen late-night meetings between certain captains and unknown visitors. Rumors multiplied until no one knew where truth ended and fear began. The Don's advisor, the oldest man in the room, loyal since the early days, approached quietly. Boss, he said, you're letting paranoia weaken us. Rivals will exploit this. We should project strength. Blame an outside enemy. The Don watched him carefully. You want me to look outward, while rot grows inward? The advisor didn't answer immediately, and that hesitation planted a seed. Later that night, the Don entered the maid's room again. He moved slower this time, noticing details others missed. A loose floorboard. A hidden envelope. Inside, pages of small, careful handwriting. observations, dates, meetings she had no business remembering. She hadn't been just cleaning. She had been watching. At the bottom of one page sat a strange symbol, a sequence of numbers that looked meaningless. The Don handed it to his tech specialist. "Decode this," he ordered. Minutes later, a message appeared on screen. Not words, coordinates. A location just outside the city. A warehouse long abandoned, but secretly owned by a company linked to his own organization. Why would she record that? The Don felt something unfamiliar crawl into his chest. Not fear, something heavier. As surveillance tightened, tempers broke. Two lieutenants nearly came to blows in the garage after accusing each other of leaking information. A trusted soldier was caught deleting messages from his phone. Even the Don's heir began acting strangely, avoiding meetings, speaking in private calls that ended abruptly when anyone entered the room. Every discovery deepened the same terrifying truth: loyalty inside the Empire was no longer absolute. Just before midnight, the tech specialist rushed into the Don's office. "Sir, we finished decrypting a second file from the Maid's belongings." The Don nodded for him to continue. "It's a message," the specialist said, "but it wasn't meant for us. It looks like she was leaving clues in case something happened to her." The screen lit up with fragmented text. "If I disappear, follow the money. Trust no one who rushes to blame outsiders. The truth lives closer than he thinks." The Don stared at the words. His empire had survived enemies, betrayals, wars. But this felt different. Someone had been playing a long game inside his own walls. Someone patient enough to manipulate loyalty itself. Outside his office, thunder rolled again. Rain began to strike the windows like distant gunfire. He leaned back slowly, eyes dark with realization. "She knew something," he said quietly. "Something powerful enough to make her a target." Before he could speak again, another message flashed onto the screen, audio recovered from a hidden device buried beneath her mattress. A trembling voice filled the room. The Maid's voice. "If he ever learns what they're planning behind his back, the Empire will tear itself apart." The recording cut off abruptly, followed by the sound of a door slamming and footsteps running. The Don's hand tightened around the edge of his desk. His most trusted circle sat just beyond those doors. Men who had built everything with him. Men who might now be planning his downfall. He stood, face unreadable. "Call everyone to the war room," he said. As guards moved to obey, he looked once more at the fragmented message glowing on the screen. The Maid hadn't just disappeared, she had left a trail meant for him alone. A trail that pointed not toward enemies beyond the gates, but toward the very foundation of his crime empire. And somewhere inside the mansion, the person who had been paying for her silence already knew one thing. The Don was finally starting to ask the right questions. The war room felt colder than a morgue. Heavy curtains sealed out the city lights. Armed guards lined the walls. Around a massive table sat the men who had helped build the Don's empire, captains, advisors, blood relatives. Once brothers, now suspects. The Don stood at the head of the table, silent long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. "You built this empire with me," he said finally. "You survived wars, prison, betrayal." His eyes moved slowly across each face. "And now, I discover secrets growing inside my own house." No one spoke. He slid a file onto the table. Inside were the Maid's notes, careful handwriting documenting late-night meetings, arguments about succession, whispers of alliances that had never been reported. "She watched everything," the Don said, "because someone here forced her to." A murmur moved through the room. One lieutenant slammed his fist down. "Boss, this is madness. She was a servant, not a spy." "Then why did someone erase footage?" the Don asked. "Why did someone pay her through hidden accounts?" Silence answered him again. He turned toward his heir apparent, his own blood, sitting at the far end of the table. Younger. Too calm. "You've been quiet," the Don said. "Tell me what you know." The heir met his eyes evenly. "I know fear is spreading. Rivals are watching. And if we start accusing each other without proof, we'll destroy ourselves." Wise words. Reasonable. but something about the tone felt rehearsed. Later that night, the Don reviewed new surveillance reports. His tech team uncovered encrypted communications between one of his senior captains and unknown contacts outside the organization, meeting locations, financial transfers, and a warehouse, the same coordinates hidden in the Maid's coded message. The Don ordered a discreet team to investigate. They returned with worse news than expected. The warehouse wasn't empty. It had been used for secret meetings between members of the Don's inner circle and representatives from a rival syndicate, an enemy family known for dismantling empires from the inside. The Don's hand tightened around a glass of whiskey. Betrayal from soldiers was expected. Betrayal from blood was something else entirely. As paranoia deepened, violence nearly erupted inside the mansion. Two captains accused each other of leaking information to the rival family. A fistfight broke out before guards intervened. Decades of loyalty cracked under the weight of suspicion. In the middle of the chaos, the Don received another discovery from the Maid's belongings, a hidden voice recorder recovered from inside a hollow book. He listened alone. Her voice was soft, nervous, urgent. "I didn't want to know these things," she whispered. "But they don't realize how loud they are when they think I'm invisible. There are meetings, plans, secrets about the Don himself. If he finds out the truth about his bloodline, everything burns." The recording ended with the sound of someone entering the room. Her breathing quickened. Then silence. The Don replayed the words again and again. Truth about his bloodline. He stared at old photographs lining his office walls. Family portraits, celebrations, alliances sealed through marriage and loyalty. For the first time in years, doubt crept into memories he had once trusted without question. Meanwhile, the rival syndicate began exploiting the Empire's instability. Anonymous messages reached lower-ranking soldiers, offering protection in exchange for information. Rumors spread through the streets that the Don was losing control, that his own family was plotting against him. Fear moved faster than bullets. One evening, the Don followed his heir in secret, watching from a distance as the young man entered a private meeting room with two senior advisors. Their conversation couldn't be heard, but their body language spoke volumes. Tension, negotiation, secrecy. When the Don entered unexpectedly, the room froze. "We were discussing security strategy," one advisor said quickly. "Without informing me?" the Don asked quietly. No one answered. The Don's gaze lingered on his heir's face. For a moment, something almost like regret flickered there, then disappeared behind calm obedience. That night, another flashback surfaced through the Maid's notes, a meeting she had witnessed months earlier, where senior members debated who should control the Empire if the Don became inconvenient. She had written a single line beneath the entry. "They believe he doesn't know what happened before he became Don." Before. The Don felt a cold realization form. His rise to power, once thought inevitable, might have been engineered by forces he never saw. And the Maid had discovered pieces of that buried history. As tension peaked, an urgent call came from his surveillance team. They had recovered another fragment of audio, this one recorded hours before the Maid vanished. The Don pressed play. Her voice trembled. "I tried to warn him," she said. "But they're watching me now. If something happens, he needs to know the truth isn't about money or power. It's about who he really is, and who betrayed him first." A second voice entered the recording, distorted, male, familiar yet unidentifiable. "You've seen too much," the man said quietly. Footsteps. A struggle. Then silence. The Don stared at the dark screen long after the audio ended. Inside the mansion, loyalty had fractured beyond repair. Blood ties felt fragile. Every ally carried secrets. And the disappearance of a quiet maid had transformed into something far more dangerous, a revelation capable of rewriting the Don's past and destroying his future. He looked around the war room one more time, seeing not brothers, but shadows. And as thunder shook the windows again, a final message arrived from his investigators. New evidence proving that someone inside his own family had been meeting secretly with the rival syndicate long before the Maid disappeared. The Don whispered to himself, almost in disbelief. The enemy was never outside. And somewhere within his empire, The person who had silenced the maid was already preparing for the moment when the Don would learn the truth about his own blood and realize that betrayal had begun long before this investigation ever started. The Don had always believed his past was buried beneath layers of loyalty and fear. But now the past was digging its way back to the surface, through whispers, secret ledgers, and the trembling voice of a missing maid who had seen too much. Rain hammered against the mansion windows as if trying to break in. Inside, the Empire felt hollow. Soldiers watched one another instead of guarding the gates. Conversations died when doors opened. Every face carried suspicion. The Don stood alone in his private office, staring at a faded photograph from decades earlier, the night he first claimed power. The celebration looked triumphant. But now, he noticed unfamiliar figures standing just behind him. Men who had disappeared soon after. Men whose names no one spoke anymore. A knock came at the door. His head of security entered quickly. "We traced the warehouse again," he said. "There's more. Financial routes lead to a safe house connected to your earliest operations, before you became Don." Before. The word echoed louder than thunder. The Don grabbed his coat and ordered a small team to follow. They drove through empty streets slick with rain, past neighborhoods that once belonged entirely to him. The safe house sat abandoned at the edge of the city, rotting wood, broken windows, silence thick as dust. Inside, memories hung in the air like ghosts. This was where deals had been made when he was still climbing, before loyalty had hardened into law. A hidden safe rested behind a false wall. When opened, it revealed old ledgers, photographs, and sealed letters. One envelope carried a familiar handwriting. The maid's. His hands tightened as he opened it. Inside were copies of documents older than his reign, proof of alliances formed behind his back, payments made to powerful figures who had engineered the fall of the previous boss. The Don's rise had not been destiny. It had been manipulation. And someone from his current inner circle had helped orchestrate it. A second document revealed something worse, a record connecting the maid's family to the original crime that paved the Don's path to power. Her father had been collateral damage in a violent purge years ago, an event the Don barely remembered, but one that shaped everything. "She wasn't spying," the Don murmured. "She was searching for the truth." A sudden noise shattered the silence. Gunfire erupted outside the safe house. His guards returned fire as masked attackers closed in, precise, coordinated, professional. Someone had known exactly where he would go. An ambush. The Don escaped through a back exit, heart pounding with an unfamiliar sensation, vulnerability. Whoever wanted the truth buried had just tried to bury him with it. Back at the mansion, tension reached a breaking point. The Don gathered his family and closest advisors in a private chamber. Old grudges surfaced immediately. Accusations flew. Some denied everything. Others deflected blame toward rivals. The air felt one spark away from violence. He placed the old documents on the table. "Everything I built," he said quietly, "was guided by people who believed I was easier to control than the man before me." His eyes burned with quiet fury. "And some of you were there from the beginning." Faces hardened. Some looked shocked. Others looked unsurprised. Then came another revelation from surveillance teams. The maid was likely still alive. Encrypted messages traced to her phone had pinged briefly inside the mansion's network, meaning someone had been communicating with her from within the house. Fear rippled through the room. The Don turned toward his oldest advisor, the man who had urged him to blame outsiders from the start. "You always told me loyalty was everything," the Don said. "But loyalty built on lies is poison." The advisor didn't deny it. Instead, he lowered his eyes. "Some truths destroy empires," he whispered. Before the Don could respond, chaos erupted. A gunshot rang out from the hallway. Guards rushed in, dragging a wounded soldier who had been trying to escape with a hidden device. Inside it, messages revealing that multiple factions within the family were preparing for a silent takeover if the Don appeared weak. Civil war was no longer a possibility. It had already begun. Exhausted and haunted by fragments of the maid's voice, the Don returned to his office late that night. Sleep never came. Memories replayed endlessly, Faces from the past, decisions made without knowing the full truth, lives lost in the name of power. He realized something terrifying. If the full story emerged, the Empire's foundation would crumble. The myth of his rise, the fear that held everyone together, would vanish overnight. A final message arrived just before dawn. A sealed envelope, delivered anonymously through internal channels. The handwriting matched the Maid's exactly. Across the front were the words, "Open when you realize who betrayed you first." His hands hesitated before breaking the seal. Inside were pages filled with revelations, names, timelines, hidden blood ties. But before he could read more than fragments, the lights in the mansion flickered violently. An alarm began to echo through the corridors. Someone had triggered a system-wide lockdown from inside the command center. The Don stepped into the hallway as guards scrambled in confusion. Gunfire echoed in the distance. Voices shouted orders that contradicted each other. Trust had completely collapsed. He looked down at the unfinished letter in his hands, proof that the Maid had uncovered a truth powerful enough to shatter everything he believed about his past, his family, and himself. And as the mansion descended into chaos, he realized the most dangerous part wasn't the enemies attacking from outside. It was the truth waiting inside that envelope. A truth no empire could survive once spoken aloud. The mansion had become a battlefield without clear sides. Emergency lights washed the marble halls in deep red. Sirens echoed through corridors once ruled by quiet obedience. Soldiers shouted conflicting orders. Some guarded doors. Others abandoned posts to protect their own allies. The empire wasn't under attack from the outside anymore. It was devouring itself from within. At the center of the chaos stood the Don. In his hand, the unfinished letter from the missing Maid trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of truth pressing against decades of carefully built lies. He walked slowly toward the war room, guards struggling to keep up as gunfire cracked somewhere in the distance. Inside, his inner circle waited. Family members, captains, advisors, some bruised, some armed, all tense. Years of loyalty had turned into suspicion that clung to every glance. The Don closed the heavy doors behind him. "No one leaves," he said quietly. Silence fell instantly. He placed the Maid's letter on the table. "This empire was built on secrets," he continued. "But now those secrets are killing us faster than any rival ever could." One captain stepped forward angrily. "Boss, the soldiers are splitting into factions. We need to strike first, eliminate anyone who questions your authority." The Don's gaze hardened. "If I start killing my own blood to protect a lie, then the empire is already dead." He opened the letter and read fragments aloud. Hidden alliances. Illegitimate heirs. A past betrayal that had allowed him to rise, but also chained him to people who never intended him to hold real power. The Maid had uncovered proof that the original coup was orchestrated by figures still inside the room. Faces changed as the truth spread. Rage. Fear. One advisor finally spoke. "You were never meant to rule alone," he said quietly. "We guided you, we protected you from enemies you couldn't see." "Guided," the Don repeated. "Or controlled." The tension snapped. Two factions drew weapons at once. Guards hesitated, unsure which orders still mattered. The Don raised a hand slowly, and for a moment the room froze under the weight of his presence. "Put the guns down," he ordered. Some obeyed. Others didn't. His heir stepped forward then, voice calm but heavy with conflict. "If the truth comes out," the young man said, "the soldiers will abandon us. The streets will burn. Rivals will take everything. Sometimes, myths are stronger than reality." The Don looked at him. His own blood, or so he had always believed. The letter hinted at darker possibilities. Bloodlines twisted by hidden pacts. Identities shaped by manipulation. "Did you know?" the Don asked quietly. The heir hesitated. That was answer enough. Outside the room, explosions echoed through the mansion as rival factions clashed openly. Glass shattered. Footsteps pounded. A once unified empire fractured into chaos. A wounded guard burst through the doors. "Boss, they've taken control of the surveillance center," he said. Messages are being sent to every crew in the city. They're telling them you've lost power. The Don's empire, his legacy, was dissolving in real time. He turned back to the table. The maid tried to warn me, he said softly. Not to destroy me, but to force me to see the truth. He lifted the final page of her letter. Names circled in red. Timelines of betrayal stretching back decades. Evidence that the disappearance wasn't the beginning. It was the first move in a much larger plan to reshape the empire entirely. A slow clap echoed from the far end of the room. One of his oldest allies stepped forward, face calm. You always were perceptive, the man said. Just not early enough. Guards shifted uneasily. Guns rose again. You built fear, the man continued. But fear doesn't last forever. Empires evolve, or they collapse. The Don's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. And the maid? The man smiled faintly. A complication. She found truths meant to stay buried. Before anyone could react, gunfire erupted again, this time inside the war room. Chaos exploded. Loyalists tackled traitors. Bullets shattered glass. The Don moved through the storm with deadly precision, but his eyes never left the names on that final page. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a rewriting of history. As the fighting slowed, survivors stood in a circle of broken trust. Bodies on the floor. Blood soaking into marble that once reflected power. Outside, the mansion burned with small fires started during the clashes. The Don looked around at what remained of his empire, fractured, wounded, uncertain. He stepped toward the center of the room. Tonight, he said, voice carrying through the silence, I name the one who betrayed me first. Every survivor leaned forward, breath held, weapons lowered just enough to listen. A guard rushed in at that exact moment, face pale. Boss, new intel just came through. The maid, she's alive. And she's sending a message directly to you. The Don froze. The room waited. The guard handed him a phone. A single audio file blinked on the screen. The Don hesitated, then pressed play. Her voice filled the room, calm now, steady, no longer afraid. You think this ends with one betrayal, she said. But the truth is bigger than any of you. The disappearance, the war, all of it was just the first step. And the person you trust most already knows how this story ends. The audio cut to silence. Every face in the room turned slowly toward someone else. The Don lowered the phone, eyes darker than ever. He began to speak, to reveal the name, the truth, the hidden history that would decide the future of the empire. And then the lights went out. Gunshots echoed again in the darkness. And somewhere in the chaos, the final betrayal finally revealed itself, just beyond the audience's reach. As the empire balanced on the edge of collapse, one decision away from either rebirth or total destruction.